Hello and welcome to my studio. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this picture. There is a technique to making a good white background, and with care and attention to detail it's possible to capture and separate even predominantly white subjects against a white background. And in this video I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. Okay, so this is what I've got set up so far. I've placed this piece of wood on top of the table that I normally use, just to give me a bigger surface area. Now I'm going to be using a piece of seamless paper, so white paper on a roll basically, and the idea of the board that I've got here is that it's longer than the roll is wide. That way I'm going to not have any trouble with the edges falling over the edge of the table, which can crease the paper. Okay, so this paper is going on a C-stand, which I have at the back here. So if I just put the arm up in the air a little, like that, and we'll just raise this up to something like that sort of height. There we go. And now I can just place this on the C-stand, like so. There we are, and I can just roll out the paper, something like that. And on the front of the table here I have a couple of A-clamps. Now it will become evident fairly soon why I've got these and why I'm sticking them on the corners of the table. But believe me, this makes it a lot easier to secure the paper in place. Okay, so let's pick that up, roll it onto the front. And now I can use those clamps just to clamp the paper to the edge of the table here. There we are. So hopefully I've got a nice curve at the back here. I don't want it to dip below the height of the table, so I'll just tighten that up ever so slightly, something like that. There we are. And that seems to be relatively even. Okay, so that's the background set up. So the next thing to do would be just to set up the subject. So there we are, I've already placed the vase in position, and I'll just place these flowers at the back here to add a little background interest. Okay, now I've picked white flowers on purpose just to demonstrate that you can actually separate a white subject from a white background if it's lit correctly. But this sort of technique will work for anything. And it's very handy sometimes to have a pure white background, especially if you're incorporating the finished picture into a website or something similar. Okay, so that's the background all set and the subject. Next thing to do would be to select a camera position. Now I'm using a medium format camera with a standard lens on the front of it. So for a medium format camera that would be an 80mm lens, and for a full frame format camera that would be a 50mm lens. Okay, so let's just pop that on the top of the tripod here. Now this camera is tethered into Capture One software. Okay, so with that I'll turn the camera on and we'll line up the shot. So the software has recognized the camera, and here you can see all the settings that I have on the camera at the moment. So it's in full manual mode. I have a shutter speed of 1/125th of a second, ISO 100, and an aperture set of f11. Now that's a reasonable starting point. So next thing to do would just be to focus up the image. So I'll just look down the viewfinder here and we'll focus up the image. There we are. Now I think I need a little more space around the subject, so I'm just going to move the whole camera tripod assembly back a bit. And we'll just refocus that. There we are. Okay, so with that all set, next thing to do would just be to grab an image with no lights so that I can just tell if I get any contamination from the house lights. So these again are the settings that I've got. I've got an aperture of f11. With that, I'll just grab an image. We'll see what we get. And there we are. You can see there's a slight ghost of an image there, but nothing too serious, so I think I'm quite safe to carry on. Right, so the next thing to do would be to set the lights so that I can illuminate the background quite evenly. So these are the lights I'm going to be using. These are 500 dual studio heads, battery powered, and I've already set them so they're both the same sort of height, as you can see here. So I'm just going to have one at one side, and I'll place the other one at about the same position at the other side. Just turn that on. Now I've previously set these so that they're both on exactly the same channel. That way I can control both of them from one channel on the flash sync trigger, which on this camera is actually built in. Okay, so just at an arbitrary energy level, what I'll do is grab an image and we'll just see where we are to start with. Okay, so we can see from that the exposure is down a bit. I would estimate that to be at least one stop under. So what I'll do is add one stop of energy to these two lights, and we'll take another picture and assess that image. So to do that, I'll just bring up the flash sync trigger, select those lights, and add one stop. There we are. Okay, so with that, I can grab that again. Yeah, and that's brought it up a little bit. If you just look at the numbers at the top of the screen here, you can see that they're not all the same, which means that I've got a bit of a color cast going on here. So I can use the white balance set feature in the software here just to set me a reasonable white balance. So anywhere on the background, I'll just click that. There we are. That's given me more of a grey, which is what I want. But you can also see that the numbers are around 200. And the maximum is 256. So I've got some leeway. It's quite important that you don't go over 256, but you want to be relatively close to it. So I'm going to add another half stop of energy to these two lights. There we are, that seems to have changed it. So you can see again from the numbers that it's come up. If I just bring in the last image, that's what we had before, that's what I've got now. So I'm really only bothered about the very background. I'm not that bothered about what's going on in the foreground. I'll come to that shortly. Okay, so one of the things that you can see from this image is that I've got some highlights on the glass and I've got some shadows at the front here. Now I don't really want those. In fact, I don't want the light which I have going on the background to be affecting the foreground very much at all. So in order to stop it doing that, I'm just going to use a couple of card flags, and literally just with the aid of an elastic band, I'm just going to put these on the lights just to direct that energy away from the foreground. There we are. And I'll do the same on the other side. So with those bits in place, let's grab that again and see what it looks like now. And there we are. You can see from that we've actually darkened down the front of this quite considerably and also lost that highlight on the vase here. So this is what we had before and this is what we've got now. So the background is maintaining that level. Okay, so that's it for the background. That's nice and even. So what I need to do now is think about how I want to light this. Now in order to bring out the detail in this, it's white already and it's against a white background. I need to introduce some shadow and I need to introduce some texture. So what I'm going to do is use a small head about here somewhere, and that should give me quite a hard light. Let's put it up and see what happens. So there we go. This is in approximately the right position. I've just got a small reflector on there just as a spill kill really. So the idea is that this is going to illuminate this directly. And you're going to get some spill around which should fill in some of those shadows. I don't want to fill in all of them because that would stop the items here being grounded. So let's just, at an arbitrary level, grab an image and see what we get. There we are, that's starting to get there. So that's filled in this quite nicely, and it's given me some shadow detail. So this is what we had before, and this is what I've got now. So at this stage, it's time to do a little bit of fine-tuning. So I'm going to start with fine-tuning the background, which is still a little low. I think I can add possibly another stop to that. So let's do that and see what happens. So once again, I'll just bring up the flash sync trigger, and let's add one stop of energy just to the background lights. And we'll just capture that. Yes, and there we are, that's brought that up quite nicely. So these are all on about 248, 249, and this is what we had before, and it was on about 225. So with that now adjusted, I'm also going to adjust the foreground light up a little just to match, and I think that can probably go up possibly half a stop. So I'll just do that and we'll grab that again. Yes, there we are, that seems to have made a difference. That's looking quite nice now. So this is what we had before, and this is what I've got now. So if I just zoom in a little to that, we'll have a look at the focus point. You can see the focus point is about here on this plant, which is okay, but I think I'd like it a little further forwards. So what I'm going to do is go into live view and just fine tune that focus point. Just make that a little brighter. There we are. And just zoom in a bit. Now I can just use these controls just to adjust that focus point. There we are. So this is now quite crisp. So having adjusted that, I'll grab that again and see what it looks like this time. There, that's crisped it up quite nicely. That's exactly the sort of thing I want. Very good. The other thing would be just to address this shadow down here. It's a bit big for my liking, so what I want to do is just use some of this excess light just to fill that in. And what I'm going to do is just use a piece of card and just a piece of wood to support it. I'm just going to place this here just to fill in those shadows a little. If I just place that there so it's more or less out of view, hopefully. I'll have a quick squint. Yeah, that looks okay. Let me just grab that and see what difference it makes. Yes, that seems to have done the trick. So this has now got filled in and this has become softened, which is what I want. I still want the shadows because I think they add to the realism of the picture. Okay, so with that now captured, that's it. What I'm going to do is go into Photoshop and just do the bare minimum of post-production. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop and I've loaded up the file of the image that I captured earlier. So the first thing that I want to do is just make a copy of the file so I can edit the copy and leave the original alone. So I've always got the original to go back to. So I'll just go onto the background layer here, right click the mouse, just ask for a duplicate layer, but we'll ask for a new document. And we'll just call it white flower. There we are. So now I can shut down the camera original, and this is what I'll be editing. Okay, so what do I need to do to this? Well, I think the first thing I like to do is just add an adjustment layer, just so that I can make these bits on the edge of the frame go to a pure white. So what I want to do is add an adjustment, and I'm going to add a levels adjustment, and I'm just going to use the set white point eyedropper tool here, just to make this part white. There we are. I'm not bothered about the rest of this going out at this stage because I'm going to bring it back in again in a moment or two. So now if I just click on the mask icon, I can just invert that mask and hide its effect. So wherever I paint in white on this mask, that will reveal that part of the adjustment. So I'll just make sure that white's selected as the foreground colour, find a paintbrush, just get a reasonable size, there we are, and make sure it's very soft. And now I can just bring that adjustment in where I need it, just on the edges there. There we are. And now looking at that, I think what I'd like to do is just adjust that bit a little more. So what I'm going to do is just go back to the levels adjustment here. I'm just going to bring that up ever so slightly. There we are, that's better. That's more like the sort of thing I want. So with that now adjusted, I can select a crop. I'm going to use this for video, so I'm using a specific ratio of 16:9. And I think I'll just move that a little bit in the frame. I purposely took the image with quite a lot of space around it, but I'm not too sure I actually got it exactly right when I was taking it. So what I can do is just fine tune it now. There we are. And I'll just ask it to do a generative expand. Click on OK. And there we have it. So by carefully controlling the exposure, it's possible to create a white background which is slightly under pure white. And then if you have a white subject in front of that and you light it correctly, you can still separate that subject from the background. And I think overall, that's worked rather well. Okay, well I hope you liked watching how I made that image, and if you like watching these sort of things, do click on the other pictures as they appear, and don't forget to subscribe. Oh, and hit the like button. Thank you very much for watching.